I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
Man enough to deadlift 500, then braid the out of my daughter's hair.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I ain't afraid of bears.
That's what bear hugs are for.
And I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
I'm not afraid of women.
I'm not afraid of women.
They want to control their bodies? I say go for it.
They want to use IVF to start a family? I'm not afraid of families.
They want to be childless cat ladies?
Have all the cats you want.
Woman wants to be president?
Well, I hope she has the guts to look me right in the eye and accept my full-throated endorsement.
Because I'm man enough to support women.
Man enough to know what kind of donuts I like.
Man enough to admit I'm lost, even when I refuse to ask for directions.
Man enough to not ban young women from reading Little Women.
Or one of those pants books that the sisters like.
I'm man enough to raw dog a flight. It sucked. Not worth it.
I'm man enough to be emotional in front of my wife.
In front of my kids.
In front of my horse.
I'm man enough to tell you that I cry at Love Actually.
Good Will Hunting.
West Side Story.
That and Predator.
And I'm sick of so-called men domineering, belittling, and controlling women just so they can feel more powerful.
That's not how my mama raised me.
Welcome to Solo TV 84. I'm your gracious host, Solomon Jones. This ad you just saw highlights one of the major glaring issues Kamala Harris and many on the left have, that they're completely out of touch when it comes to men, particularly young men. Today we're talking about a trend that's been surprising the mainstream media, the rise of young men, especially Gen Z men, who voted for Donald Trump and also are leaning more towards being conservative. The media and left-leaning groups seem shocked by this shift. This has been brewing for well over a decade as young men increasingly feel ignored and ostracized by the left. Historically, young men have been more liberal, but now they're trending more conservative. In this video, we're going to talk about the reasons why, and here we go.
You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
They're trying to push this idea that conservatives are awful and that they're weird. That kind of slander and that kind of negative talk towards our side that does exist on our side towards them, but nowhere near with the viciousness.
The left loves to view heterosexual men as villains, and the misandrous views don't just go towards conservative young Gen Z men and millennial men, but men in general. Many young men feel the left views heterosexual men as inherently problematic. Remember the hashtag #MeToo era, toxic masculinity, trying to paint men as villains, that every man is out there as soon as they step outside the house, that they're looking to SA as many women as they can. The left outdated idea and trope that men have always held power misses the mark with young men, especially Black and Latino men who have historically been excluded from real influence in America. Young men in these communities know that they haven't benefited from power structures, yet they are blamed and overlooked when these issues go unaddressed. Let's see what recently Obama had to say about this.
Because my understanding, based on reports I'm getting from campaigns and communities, is that we have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. Now, I also want to say that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. So if you don't mind, just for a second, I'm going to speak to y'all directly and say that when you have a choice that is this clear, when on the one hand you have somebody who grew up like you, knows you, went to college with you, understands the struggles and pain and joy that comes from those experiences, who's had to work harder and do more and overcome and achieves the second highest office in the land and is putting forward concrete proposals to directly address the things that are vital in our neighborhoods and our communities, from housing to making sure that our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents can afford medicine, and making sure that we are dealing with prices that are too high and rents that are too high, and are committed to making sure that we maintain the Affordable Care Act. So everybody's got health care and cares about things like education and entrepreneurship in our neighborhoods. And that's on one side. And on the other side, you have someone who has consistently shown disregard, not just for the communities, but for you as a person. And you're thinking about sitting out? But, you know, because Putin might be. And you're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that. Because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president.
I think a lot of people are turned off by being told who they should vote for based on skin color. I'm a black man. I'm in a black Greek-led organization. I went to an historically black college or university. None of that should matter with regards to how I make a decision on who I'm going to vote for.
Why do you think she's not the one?
I didn't think she was the one in 2020. I didn't find her to be a formidable enough candidate to get the base out to support her. They overlook class in the same way that Hillary Clinton 8 years ago took the black vote as well as the unionized community for granted. When you think that you have something just based on the history, and you don't speak to them, you don't come into the community, then the community there's going to come a point where the community just gets sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Notice that Obama is using narratives and tropes like, oh, it's because she's a woman. And I'm not going to be disingenuous and say that may not be true for certain people, but the reality is, like Eric Brown said, Kamala Harris just sucked as a candidate, not just in 2020, but also in 2024. And her message was disjointed and didn't resonate with overall majority of Americans, particularly young men. I mean, look, just listen to this clip of the interview and tell me what she was talking about here.
Because when we think about the strength of our democracy, you know, I think that there's a duality to the nature of democracy. When it's intact, oh, it's so strong in terms of what it does to uphold and protect individual rights and freedoms. So strong in its nature. And it is very fragile.
As I said, if you look at the primary numbers back in 2020, Kamala wasn't really doing that hot. And the fact that she was shooed in 2024 made it easier for her to run as a president, but she still wasn't popular. However, when you bring up these rational facts, you're deemed as a misogynist. This is one of the things that the left loves to do. They love to shame men, particularly heterosexual young men. And guess what? Rather than addressing core issues like jobs, the economy, affordable housing, the left leans on gender identity and shaming tactics. For example, Kamala put out an ad implying that young men who didn't vote for her might miss out romantically.
Hello, ladies. I'm Trey. It's good to be here.
Hey, Trey.
Hey, hey.
So, what do you do and how much do you make?
I work in finance, making six figures.
How tall are you?
6'5".
Okay. Do you work out?
I like to stay active, yeah.
Do you have a plan to vote?
I didn't plan on it.
A really nice place. Have you been here before?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite spots. I bring everybody here.
I said I go on a lot of dates, but...
Like I said, this approach just seems out of touch. And I wonder if Obama saw this ad, because here you are trying to shame men for not voting for a woman, but said woman, Kamala Harris, put out this ad implying that if men didn't vote for her, they weren't going to get any cookie. They weren't going to get that you know what. And see, when you use such an approach against men, this is why heterosexual Gen Z men, millennial men as well, primary age men, feel like their needs are being ignored. And the sad part is these radical leftist women have played into it with the 4B movement. Now, the 4B movement originally started in South Korea, but it's a movement where women basically are boycotting dating, sex, marriage, and having children. Now you have these leftist women that are saying that they're gonna use this method because they want to punish men.
All I have to say is good luck getting laid. Especially in Florida, because Me and my girlies are participating in the 4B movement. That's my next plan. And I'm dead fucking serious.
There is not a single ounce of affection that a man will get out of me after this election. I'm not dating men. I'm not sleeping with men. I'm not talking to men. Y'all lost that privilege.
You know what's funny about this whole 4B movement? These leftist women are only punishing leftist men. You're not punishing conservative men. You're only punishing men on your side. I mean, and you're actually helping the abortion situation as well by closing your legs. Amazing the things that Donald Trump has done, and he isn't even in office yet. And so when you start to see propaganda like this being spewed out against young men often feel silenced for supporting Trump or the right and afraid of backlash, not just from advertisements like this, but from friends, family, and even their girlfriends. Gen Z and millennial men are pressured to keep their beliefs private, fearing judgment or being labeled misogynist for simply discussing issues that concern them. And this is why the left is so out of touch when it comes to primary age men, young men, because they don't care about their issues.
The men of Gen Z are leaning towards former President Trump. Down in Northfield, Chris Fleming is the president of St. Olaf College Republicans and says that he sees it firsthand.
We've seen a lot more men joining the organization lately.
And he thinks he knows what worked.
Campaign did a great job reaching out to Gen Z men is the group of voters I'm a part of. I think Barron Trump made some good calls going on the Joe Rogan podcast, going on Theo Vaughn.
The left's media strategy feels stale. During Obama's time, the left had a hip, youthful appeal. Now they seem out of touch, while the right capitalizes on social media to reach young men. Influencers like Sneeko, Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, the issues that they discuss, young men care about. And young men feel like that, hey, these guys speak for me, right? Now, Kamala Harris made a critical decision that was a huge mistake to avoid Joe Rogan, the world's most popular podcaster. Rogan has a massive male following with 56% of men aged 18 to 34 tuning in. Rogan has nearly 50 million listeners a week, and the fact that Harris didn't want to sit down and talk to him shows how out of touch the left are, shows that Harris as a candidate didn't want to face Rogan because she just didn't have the answers, or she didn't want to have the conversation that wasn't cookie cutter. The mainstream media called Kamala Harris. Joe Rogan wouldn't have done that. Citizens media, meaning independent media, social, influencers, I don't want to call them influencers, but reporters or commentators that are on YouTube, Spotify, that are not in the mainstream media, have become hugely popular with Gen Z audiences. And the reality is that Kamala Harris wouldn't go on the biggest podcast in the world is the unraveling of her campaign that sealed the nail in her coffin for her to lose. And shout out to Barron Trump for telling his dad, hey, go on Joe Rogan, go talk to Aiden Ross, this and that. President Trump looked like the cool president in this situation. Gen Z men are increasingly conservative because they've lost hope in the current system. They see Donald Trump as a figure who speaks to their concerns, someone who's built wealth and shown economic promise during his previous presidency. Inflation is strangling Americans, particularly young men who struggle to make ends meet. Most young men don't see a future in even owning a house. A lot of young men still live at home. The left lack of empathy and its focus on identity politics is a massive turnoff. The left seems to relish in chaos and in gender war. If the left doesn't start addressing everyday issues that matter to Americans, they may face an unprecedented conservative wave that could dominate politics for the next 15 to 30 years.